Okay, thank you for the introduction, Noel, and good evening, everybody. Dear Prime Minister, I want to bring to your attention the detrimental increase of poverty amongst the UK and how it is affecting our social care system. We have an increased number of young people and adults being affected with mental health, increased mental health. And the root of this problem is poverty and all the factors that come along with it. So me, myself, my name's Ashleigh and I've also been a victim of homelessness. And due to homelessness, that led me to then have a mental breakdown. And then despite the number of services that was involved, the only way that I could get a home to provide for myself and my children was to move 200 miles across the country with no support, no family, leaving your loved ones. It is not a nice thing to have to do. And this is happening to not just myself, hundreds and thousands of families across the country are being relocated due to the lack of affordable housing. Now, this does not just impact the parents of the household, it's also impacting the children, which is having a detrimental effect on youth crime, knife crime that is happening in our communities. So I really would like for you to take into account and be able to sit down and have a discussion on how we can work together with people with lived experiences of the issue and how we can tackle these issues and find solutions together. Over in the borough that I live in, Calderdale, there is over 500,000 young people that are on the borderline of poverty, already living in poverty. This is affecting education, not only just mental health, it's affecting education, it's affecting health, it's affecting communities, people not knowing how to cope. The social care system are over exhausted because there's cutbacks there, and the waiting list for people to get support is over 18 months, maybe 2 years on the waiting list for children to be able to see camps. Last week, a young person, 19 years of age, committed suicide because she was failed by the system. She could not get the support that was needed. And there's many other children across the country, sadly to say, and I would not like to see it happen, I want to see it stop, are also losing their lives in the same way, as well as adults. There's so many different solutions that we can use to better the situation. For example, the cost of living crisis that we are in, it's okay to increase and put tax on food that are basic needs. However, we are not increasing salaries. The average person, working class family, are also having to now rely on food banks, which is something they never had to do before. So that's more numbers of that is also increasing as well within our community. So Prime Minister, what would you do? What are you going to do about the poverty that is the increased amount of poverty that is happening within the UK? And will you be able to come together with not just the people within your government, but to come down to the people that are working frontline and work with organisations like ourselves, Let's End Poverty, to work together to bring those solutions? Thank you.
Dear Prime Minister, firstly, congratulations. You know how much power you wield now, and I'm sure you want to make change. You could even change the lives of some of the 900,000 children currently living in food poverty. Make their lives more than a fight for survival. Make it so families aren't living on cheapest frozen food. Make it so they are not climbing the ladder of success on an empty stomach. Or make it so children living with no food security have at least one meal a day at school. Extend free school meals to every family in receipt of universal credit. Save lives. You must have a lot on your mind now, more than before. And I guess one of those pressures is the pressures on the NHS. And childhood obesity is sky high and putting more pressure. Here, I will be the case study. When I was 9 years old, the NHS came to my school. They weighed every single person in my year group, and I was one of 2 children that were told I was morbidly obese and needed to eat less. Now, there's a lot of factors there that were missed, but the main ones are, number 1, I have a neurodevelopmental disability. My muscles are quite literally knitted together closer, making my muscles weigh more than the average person, and muscle weighs more than fat. Number 2, I couldn't eat less. Most days I had no breakfast. At school I had a sandwich, drink, snack and a bit of fruit because we didn't qualify for free school meals. And for dinner we probably had pasta or whatever was cheapest. Like hundreds of thousands of children across the UK who are also obese, no matter how many times they walk the length of the city. You could change children's stories, for they have not been written yet. Extend free school meals and change what food is affordable. Makes it something other than pasta and ultra-processed meat. You would decrease NHS pressures and, most importantly, save lives, because food is life or death, and food poverty hurtles you towards an early grave. So, Prime Minister, I hope you can see why it is so important for you to tackle poverty once and for all. It impacts more than we even know yet. Children deserve to be healthy and safe with the chance to be anything they want to be, but poverty takes that away every single day. Could you imagine doing all the work to become Prime Minister on an empty stomach, only being able to think about when and if your next meal will arrive? Would you have still made it? Now imagine what young people would be capable of with food in their tummies and given a chance. Thank you.
Dear Prime Minister, my name is Christopher, and in the past I have been a food bank user. I live in Cornwall, like I say, which tends to rely on tourism, which tends to mean it's low paid and low security, despite having high house prices and generally a high cost of living. Also, the council was from us about there's also issues regarding how disability is seen as well. There's a lot of assumptions about disability and the things what it can and cannot do. In terms of how the future will look without poverty, there'll be more inclusion, there'll be reduced stigma, especially towards those who are economically discriminated against, and there'll be more opportunities for people to able to escape poverty and be able to contribute to society in their own way, and also that there'll be a chance for them to be less reliant on charities and on the care system. The things what PM needs to do is to need to improve SEND provision. That's something what hasn't really happened certainly in the last 40 years. Unfortunately, there's unfortunately a huge gap in welfare and social provision. For example, the moment I found out today that I've broken my toe, I fractured it, and I rang Disability Call up today about is there any help available for me. They said basically no. They basically said to me like Norman Cornwall, you're on. Unfortunately, that happens a lot in Cornwall, which is very frustrating. And that's the fourth reason, the reasons why poverty needs to go. This last week, it was Learning Spiritual Awareness Week, and the big issue in terms of my main cap is a special magazine, which was made by people learning spiritualists. There it is. On the back of that, there is someone called Sonia, who, and this is her quote, my learning abilities have had a very bad effect on my life. And I think about the people who I've seen in my journey of disability in the last 15 years. And again, yesterday, I had someone visitor from a professor who's blind, who comes from a university up in Windsor. And I thought about her, and I thought about Sonia, and my last thing is why is disability being a success story such a such a rare thing? Why is it only made possible for a select few? Why isn't everybody with disability able to have a life which they want? Why is it only for a select few, basically?
Thank you very much, Neil, and thank you all for having me. I want to focus my question to the Prime Minister on holistic approach to removing poverty. And this includes systemic creation of poverty that is centered around education, benefits, and immigration. On education, I came to this country and was here and could not do anything, could not work, could not, fend for myself, no accommodation, and I was here with a baby. And I didn't get my status until after 10 years of being here. And before then, I had a degree in marketing. And as you know, with all the stress, all the long waiting, and all the difficulties, challenging of bringing up a child, alone without, any dime in my pocket, I lost appetite with, what I've already achieved. And after 10 years, I said, okay, what can I do? Let me go into, the healthcare sector, because I am a very compassionate person and I know what it is to care for older people. And I wanted to do this through nursing, and I could not access funding to do this. So I struggled. I was at the mercy of charities, third sectors to do this. And I was told I have to do 1 year in a college before I can continue my studies at the university. This I did all by myself and with the help of people. After that, I went on to apply for my university degree, and I was denied funding. For 2.5 years, I was just struggling all by myself, doing almost 3,000 hours for free while watching my colleagues, my classmates, enjoying their funding and everything. And I didn't see it as a problem because I was really keen on doing that so that I can be who I want to be. So my question is this: if you want to eradicate poverty, these are some of the systemic creation of poverty that has to be looked into. Immigration Act 1971, why should I have to live half of my life here when I already have leave to remain before I can access funding to become who I want to be? Why should I be married to a British before I can become who I want to be? Or why should my parents come from here before I can become who I want to be? I want you, the Prime Minister, to please look into this Immigration Act 1971 that is depriving thousands and thousands of immigrants from becoming who they want to be. Even her children cannot access education because of this clause. And in Scotland, this has been, a thing of the past since last year. We campaigned, we lobbied, we begged the government, and at the end of the day, a child was badly affected. This was what broke the camel's back. This child wanted to do medicine, and she was short of just under a month. And because of that, she was asked to stay for another 1 year before she can access funding or do her medicine. And then people felt this was not right. And Just Right Scotland took up this issue, and we went to court and won the case. We won it on the basis that it is discrimination. And today in Scotland, the Immigration Act 1971, that is based on long residency rule, has been removed, which means if you have a leave to remain and you are here, before the start of your study for 3 years, then you can access funding. And even asylum seekers' children can go to school and access funding as well. So I want, if it can happen in Scotland, why can't it happen everywhere else? Then on benefits, Sefi has already touched on almost all the points I wanted to touch on. but there are still, some bugs and problems around benefits. I know across all the political party, they want to, do something about universal credit by increasing it. It's not just about increasing the universal credit benefits. There are also challenges around universal credit that put people in poverty. I had a friend who is on universal credit. She gets some money every 19th of the month, and she was hoping to have money in her account, and she went to the supermarket to shop. After buying everything, she presented her card and there was no money in it. So this was not communicated to her that she has been assessed on 2 months, I don't know what's called, on 2 months assessment period. What was 2 months assessment period for those who are not used to this? She earned money in January that has been spent on herself and her family for food and other stuff. She also earned money in February that has been spent already. Then in March, she was assessed based on the money she has already, spent, and she was left with nothing. And this was a weekend, nothing to give to the children, no food, and it was too late to assess the Scottish Welfare Fund, and food banks were not opened. She has to now live, with what she was able to get from friends and neighbors. This is not good. Then on immigration, people who came here, cannot work, cannot do anything. And then when they want to apply for their immigration status, they are being asked to pay X so much to do that. But I know in the first instance, like in my first instance, I was assisted, but the second one, I was expected to pay about 4,000 plus for me and my daughter. And this money I did not have. And I had to, thank God for Poverty Truth Community. They are really around me to make sure I was able to do that. These are things that causes, anxiety, mental health, and also can make you homeless or statusless, which means you're back to square one. So why should somebody renew for every 30 months and pay so much before you can have a leave to remain, indefinite leave to remain? So I see this Prime Minister as a money-making venture. I see it as, a way of putting people in a box. So please, Prime Minister, I want you to know that poverty is one of the richest cause of death, cause of illness, cause of isolation, cause of bullying, low self-esteem, obesity. Poverty causes all this. So if we can abolish, poverty, then the world will be a better place for everybody, especially for immigrants. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Neil. And I've got my personal message to the new Prime Minister. Dear Prime Minister, I'm sure you know the statistics on poverty, but let me start by reminding you of them. Poverty in the UK is increasing. More than 1 in 5 people in the UK were in poverty in 2022-2023. That represents 14.3 million people, including 8.1 million working age adults, 4.3 million children, and 1.9 million pensioners. And poverty is also deepening. Around 3.8 million people experienced destitution in 22-23, where they could not meet their most basic physical needs to stay warm, dry, clean, and fed. This included around 1 million children. More people are working but still struggling against poverty. 2/3 of working age adults experiencing poverty live in a household where at least one person is in work. Prime Minister, poverty is keeping people down all over the UK, which is why I'm part of the movement Let's End Poverty, calling upon you as Prime Minister to make ending poverty in the UK a priority of your government. I'm seeing the impact of poverty on people every day in my role as City Centre Minister at Methodist Central Hall in Manchester. Central Hall is in the heart of Manchester city centre, near Piccadilly Gardens. And the conversations I have with people who stop me in the gardens, who come into our cafe for a brew, who pray in our chapel, or attend our various drop-ins tell the same story. Not enough to live on, having to make desperate choices between food and energy, feeling anxious about bills. I come into contact with many people who are experiencing homelessness. The numbers of people sleeping rough or being vulnerably housed is once again on the rise. The Respite Project, serving breakfast every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, run by LifeShare in the basement of Central Hall, is our bellwether here. In October, they were serving 80 breakfasts each day. Now it's nearer 130. The number of children living in temporary accommodation is today the highest on record. Children are trapped into living transient lives, with more social homes being sold off than built. And as you form the new government, you've got to start thinking more radically and quickly about the housing crisis that has brought so many people into a poverty situation. In Britain's broken housing market, too many are locked out, priced out, and the cost is counted in lives left in limbo. At Central Hall, we also work a lot with refugees and those seeking asylum. We've got 2 refugee charities based in our building. The no recourse to public funds requirement means that there are very many vulnerable and scared people who are living in total destitution. Could this definition not be abolished? Why is there not at least the right to work? And the immediate eviction of people who have received a positive decision from the Home Office has been a wicked development, and this practice must be urgently removed. I'm also the chair of the Greater Manchester Food Security Action Network, and each time we meet as a network, we receive an update from our latest GM resident survey as to the impact of poverty in our city region. And we hear stories from people who've become members of our local food provider, the Bread and Butter Thing. The figures, Prime Minister, are stark, and the stories are heartbreaking. That's why I'm bringing this message to you as part of the Let's End Poverty movement, because we believe in a future where poverty is no longer allowed to keep anyone down, where everyone has enough to eat, has a good quality of life, and is supported through hard times, and where food banks, clothes banks, and warm hubs aren't the accepted norm. We need you, as Prime Minister, to step up and take responsibility. We need urgent, coordinated action on poverty and everything that locks people in it. The long-term human cost of the neglect is too big and too damaging to ignore. All the polls say, 88% of people say, that more should be done to tackle poverty, and yet it hardly featured in the election manifestos. So we need structural, systemic change and political action. It's got to be a priority for you as Prime Minister. The pandemic has shown how much people in this country care for others, and your government has to now show this same spirit. Let me tell you, we stand ready as civil society to work with you. Let's end poverty together.
Yeah, okay, I'll start. So, dear Prime Minister, I want you to truly understand the true extent of what people are going through. 6 years ago, when I was 17, my family and I were evicted from our family home after my mum had to come out of work and was hit with the benefit cap. She was left with the choice of either feeding her children or paying the rent. You can probably guess what she had to choose. Sorry. We went through months of being placed in B&Bs and hotels outside of our area with no cooking facilities and had to live off noodles and sandwiches. My sister missing their first day of nursery and my other missing their first day of high school. To be told at that point education wasn't a priority at that time. We had never felt so isolated or alone. At that time, I was doing an apprenticeship. I remember when I got told I had got the job, I was so excited. It was meant to be the start of my career, but being moved out of area, I couldn't carry on, and it resulted in me having to leave it all behind. You're probably thinking, well, that was 6 years ago, so why are you still bothered about it? The reality of the matter is that it's just happening all over the country, and it's just getting worse and worse. The trauma and impact it has on children and you as a person often goes unnoticed, and it can stay with you for the rest of your life. I lost friends as a result. My mental health had deteriorated, and it still affects me to this day. Never feeling safe or like I'm not good enough, which affects every aspect of my life, work, making friends or relationships, as it does get to the point where it feels like your whole world can come crashing down, like it did when I was 17. What should have been the happiest years of my life was a time where I shouldn't have had to worry, but it was quite the opposite. Young people and children and people all over the country experiencing poverty, why should they have to be punished? We are more than just a statistic of someone. We are people and human. Since then, my mum and I joined the Poverty Truth Commission in West Cheshire and have set up our own community group with our friend Sarah called Thrive to Survive, where we support and advocate for people who are experiencing poverty and financial hardship. I am a strong advocate for the Poverty Truth Commission's ethos. Nothing about us without us is for us. There are so many people in my community and not all over the country nationally struggling to make ends meet and having to go without, and they shouldn't have to live like that at all. People with lived experience need to be at the very heart of decisions being made and actually be around the table, sharing what will help and make a difference to them. Co-production, that's what will help influence change. Charities, voluntary organisation, volunteers and public services like the NHS, who are on the front line that are saving people's lives and offering vital support, should be provided with the resources and support to do so. And decisions and systems that are designed should be so much more than just sticking a plaster on a cause. It needs to be a lot more around intervention and preventing people in the first place. A future without poverty would mean people being treated with respect and dignity, not defined, labelled and put in a box, not having to make the decision between eating or keeping warm. It would mean the 15 food banks in my area would close and not have a need to exist. For parents to be able to have a meal rather than going without so their children are fed. For all the working people who work tirelessly and endlessly all week to be able to afford not just the basics, but some luxuries too. For people who are homeless to have a place to call their home, warm and full bellies, and to no longer be overlooked on the street. And for the older generation too, who have worked most of their lives to be recognised, and they need to be given more support rather than just the bare minimum. We also need to have a better social security system as well. For everyone who fights a constant battle with mental health, they need to be accepted and able to access services straight away rather than being put on a waiting list to be given support, which by then it could be too late. For the children of today, and hopefully one day my future children, will be able to live their lives without stress, without the anxiety of where their next meal is coming from, and to not have to use candles in order to see in the dark because the electric has run out and they can't scrape enough together to cover the emergency. People living with this and facing the struggles and pain of poverty and social injustice day to day should be the ones at the forefront, making the decisions and influence that change. Should be a society without poverty, stigma, or blaming and judgment, but a world where people have enough money to live on. There's compassion, empathy, kindness, and more importantly, for people to be happy and live rather than just existing and trying to survive. My final question to you, Prime Minister, is are you going to stand with us to improve people's lives for the better by taking the action to end poverty? Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me today. Right, dear Prime Minister, will you use your voice, power and authority as Prime Minister to bring about changes which would help ensure our social security system protects people from needing a food bank to survive? You need to do this because these are some of the stats from the last financial year that have been collected by the Trussell Trust across the UK that evidence part of the reality and depth of the problem that is facing this nation. It isn't right that although we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, over 3.12 million food parcels were handed out last year through Trussell Trust food banks. It isn't right that over 1.14 million of those were to children. It isn't right that this represents a 94% increase from 5 years ago. It isn't right that in February 2024, 55% of those receiving universal credit said they had run out of food in the last month and couldn't afford more. Behind every stat is a real person struggling to survive, and this is just one person's daily reality. I skip meals and eat once a day in the evening. I cannot afford personal grooming items. I'm constantly cold and hungry. I get ill with colds and headaches. I run out of money 2 weeks before payday. I exist day to day and hope I can continue to be able to work to stay afloat. Life is a constant struggle that I'm starting to give up on as a daily battle. And this is just one of the heartbreaking stories that we hear on a daily basis. Now, the cost of living crisis and COVID-19 pandemic have had a major impact, but they are not the main cause. They have exposed and exacerbated a longer-term crisis, that of a weakened social security system that is unable to protect people from the most severe forms of hardship. It isn't right that in the last year, the reason 71% of people were referred to a food bank was because their income was insufficient, leaving them unable to afford the cost of essentials and driving them into unmanageable debt. It isn't right that 65% of the support we give is to families with children, and families with 3 or more children are especially likely to face severe hardship. 30% of food parcels went to families with 3 or more children. This is a figure that has more than doubled from over 5 years ago. It isn't right that certain groups of people in our communities are more likely to face hunger than others. Disabled people, families with children and single parents, carers, people from ethnic minority groups, people from the LGBTQ+ community, people who spent time in care as a child, and people who've had a recent adverse life event. It isn't right that our social security system is the driving factor in pushing people towards hunger. The system which we expect to support us in hard times is failing to protect so many of us. It isn't right that 1 in 5 people in a working household are having to turn to food banks. This is compounded by too many jobs being inaccessible, unstable, and not paying enough to cover essential costs. It isn't right that 22% of referrals to food banks are from people suffering with ill health, both physical and mental. These health conditions drive up costs for household and make it difficult to find or sustain employment. It isn't right that the design of the disability benefit system is putting disabled people in impossible situations, leaving them with too little income to cover the essential. 69% of people referred to food banks are disabled. We are seeing an increased number of people struggling with debt. Benefits are failing to meet the basic cost of living, and there are less financial help options available to help people, so underlying issues are taking longer to address. Food bank need is at an historic high. This is a record to be ashamed of, and the public will judge your government and whether it succeeds in reversing this tide. Food banks are neither the right or sustainable response to people going without essentials because their incomes are too low. 84% of the public polled believe that ensuring everyone has enough money for basic needs should be a high priority for the UK government, and more action needs to be taken to better protect people from being unable to afford the essentials. A few comments from some of our food banks says the need has gone up. We've been giving out a lot more. We're giving out more than we are receiving. I feel like next year we're going to get even busier. Change is needed. These high levels of hardship are damaging our nation's health, holding back our economy and harming the prospects of our young people. We need you to help to build a society where everyone can afford the essentials and therefore help to unlock the potential in our communities. This is possible, but only if the right decisions are made for you, by you and your government. Thank you.